Hey, Frank. Congratulations, Frank, on the ICC brief. Welcome, Frank, and congratulations on your Palestinian brief. I'm very proud of you. And, okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Zoom Palestine. Waiting for more poets. Frank, I know you have poetry for us, right? I hope.
Yeah, I got a poem.
I hope. Yeah. I hope. And well, I know Farid is supposed to come on. Sometimes he gets the time mixed up. So what I'm going to do is, I had this wonderful video about Mahmoud Darwish, the memorial from his funeral. It's very powerful. So I'm going to share that with you all so that you can enjoy that. So let me put that video on for us. Let's go. 1 minute. What happened to my Zoom meeting? Here it is here. Okay. Let me share that.
Remember what year that was?
No.
Because I think people were calling me, and I think I was in Ramallah when it happened, and I think it was not too far from Ramallah where he had his funeral, but I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I don't remember the.
Okay, it was recent. It was recent.
It wasn't that long ago.
No.
Let me see if I can manage to get this share it. Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on a minute. We'll turn up the volume. I think this is a news
expressed in words. The life of the Arab world's most celebrated poet is over. How will all those touched by the work of Mahmoud Darwish remember him? Welcome to the program. I'm David Foster. He gave a voice to Palestinians longing for their own state. Sometimes he was even critical of his own people. On Wednesday, thousands turned out to pay their respects to the poet Mahmoud Darwish. It was the biggest funeral in the West Bank since Yasser Arafat's 4 years ago. Noor Odeh reports on a final farewell.
Mahmoud Darwish mourned in Palestine and beyond. A literary genius known for his humility arrives at the Palestinian homeland for his final journey. Received by the president and dignitaries from across the world, Darwish is honored with a state funeral, recognizing him as a national hero. It was an emotional ceremony.
Mahmoud Darwish was a teacher, a scholar, a shining light in the art of literature and excellence, the essential art for our people's course of resistance. He was a steadfast hero, sacrificing and selfless, a leader of his people on all fronts of resistance.
Darwish was remembered for his uncompromising passion for Palestine and unmatched courage in challenging everything, including a poet recognized for his invaluable contribution to the Arab language and modern poetry. Mahmoud Darwish left a universal imprint on literature, with his poems translated to over 20 languages.
People are mourning Mahmoud Darwish because they believe in his cause, they believe in his message, and he was the pulse of their conscience.
As his funeral procession started, Darwish was greeted by those who loved him most, the people. It was a ceremony full of symbolism. Next to Ramallah's cultural palace, thousands gathered to receive him at his final resting place, overlooking occupied Jerusalem, a city he dedicated so much of his poetry to. His poetry, however complex, transcended boundaries and educational divides, sung by thousands across the Arab world. One of Darwish's most memorable poems was about longing to return home to his mother, her bread and morning coffee, and confessing he feared dying before her because the thought of bringing her to tears was simply unbearable.
From all walks of life and from across the occupied Palestinian nation, they came to mourn him and bid him farewell. Mahmoud Darwish, the prince of poetry and the symbol of Palestinians' collective memory. Listening to his words about life and death, they remembered him for genius in politics and literature.
Tears and music mixed in Ramallah on Wednesday. There was plenty to say about Darwish by the many forever touched by his poetry.
He tried to simple our peace in his words when he writes his poems. I love him as all the Palestinian people love him.
In death as in life, Mahmoud Darwish united Palestinians in recognizing the beauty, even in pain, reminding them always of his conviction that in Palestine there was plenty to live for. Nouraudi Ramallah for Inside Story.
Now, before we came on air, I questioned whether I was the right person to do this program. Perhaps somebody who'd grown up living and breathing Darwish's work would be better. I thought it might be a little bit like someone who'd never heard of the Beatles doing a celebration of John Lennon's life just after he was shot. But this program, I believe, is not just for aficionados of Darwish's work, but for those worldwide who might know little of the man but want at least to know something. So I sit here ready to learn why so many have been in tears, why millions feel that they've lost somebody very special. In Ramallah, our guest tonight, Ahmed Harb, a novelist and professor at Bitar University. In Tel Aviv, Jacqui, an Israeli poet, playwright and novelist. And here in Doha, Lamis Andoni, a writer on Palestinian affairs. Welcome to all of you. Each one of you, I know, a friend of Mahmoud Darwish's. So I want to take a tack in this program where you lead the discussion. I have a few questions to ask, but I really want you to interact with each other, to tell each other what you know about him, what you believed in, where it's no longer an academic dissection, where it goes beyond words. Ahmed Had, let me come to you first, if I may, appropriately enough, in the West Bank. What do you believe the world has lost with the death of Mahmoud Darwish?
I believe the world has lost a great poet, a great human being. The world lost a recognized voice for the Palestinian cause, for the Palestinian people, a voice which embodies the Palestinians' hopes, aspirations for freedom and democracy.
Would he have been a great poet if he hadn't had a Palestinian cause to write about? Must a poet feel pain to be recognized as great?
I think so. I think he could be a great poet without maybe the Palestinian cause. It seems that, as in any case, with any poet, that the environment, the circumstance of the poet would give a recognized voice, a recognized way of expression. And in the case of Mahmoud Darwish, he gave a recognized expression for the Palestinian cause to all humanity. He achieved through the Palestinian locality, I would say, the international recognition, and he's succeeded, I think, to extend the word to the whole world.
Lamis, you were telling me that you'd hardly slept since you heard the news of his death. You felt very, very close to him. What's the deepest pain that you feel at the moment? The loss of a great writer, an inspirational man, or a friend?
The fact that he's no longer around. We have relied on him as a poet, as a friend, as a human being, to always incite us for love, invoke the best in us, speak to our inner feelings. He was motivated by love, and he taught us that the motivation should be love, because if you want to struggle for justice, it cannot be motivated by hate, but it's love for life and for humanity that should be our mover. We will miss his presence in our lives. He will miss the fact that he, at every juncture of our history, was telling us how we feel better than we could ever say. He was describing and telling our story and telling the story of the human condition in a broader meaning better than anyone could say. We will miss his presence. I'll miss him personally. I'll miss him as a Palestinian. I'll miss him as a human being.
Ahmed, you were nodding as Lamis was expressing those sentiments. Let me ask you both before I go to Yitzhak Laor in Tel Aviv. Was he a happy man?
Perhaps not very happy.
Oh my God.
Lamis?
Not very happy.
Well, this is why he was so influenced by the human condition. And this is part of his strength, that he couldn't be always happy, because he was able to see the abyss of life. And he would go down to the abyss and pull himself up and pulls us with them, pull our soul. He was able to pull our soul with him and see the light again. So he couldn't have been happy, and that was part of his strength, or else he wouldn't have been as sensible and sensitive to articulate our feelings and the depth of our sorrows and victories and love and anger and rebellion.
Ahmed, he reflected more on death in his later years in a particular way, didn't he?
Yes, he reflected a lot on his death, especially after 1998. And it seems that he was eulogizing himself in his late works. And he tries to philosophize the idea of death, to challenge the idea of death, as if he is saying, in other words, that you, death, will not defeat me. And through that, he's saying that death will not defeat us as people, as well as individuals.
Let's go to Tel Aviv. Yitzhak Laor, fellow poet, friend of Mahmoud Darwish's. Was he your friend as a poet, as a human being, or as somebody from another country fighting about a cause?
Well, I guess that the beginning of our connection was about poetry, because he knew my poetry and he heard about my political position, so it was easier to contact each other. Yet the connection was basically on the telephone. It was not from one country to another, but he lived under brutal occupation. I live in the metropolitan of this colonial project, so telephone calls would be the most appropriate way to describe this friendship. And we did not talk about poetry on the telephone. We talked about, I asked him about his health every once in a while. He asked me about my being, and we talked about politics a lot. So one could say that that friendship was a mixture of all these things.
What did you like about him the most?
The way he used to encourage me, him in Ramallah, calling me in Tel Aviv, and trying to encourage me and to just to ask and to try and to see the positive side of things. Even if he didn't find much, he would ironically joke about it. I mean, he had a great sense of humor.
Now, at an early stage of his life, Darwish said, against barbarity, poetry can resist only by confirming its attachment to human fragility, like a blade of grass on a wall, while armies march by. After the break, we'll be discussing the role of poetry in changing society. Stay with us, if you will.
Hey, so check it out. This is a emergency sleeping bag. These things normally cost $30, and during the wintertime, people pay full price for them all day long. But because it is...
Okay, so we'll stop. We'll stop, and I love the blade of grass analogy. I think that was just so marvelous. Linda, if you want to unmute, well, you were moving some stuff around. I muted you, but if you'd like to unmute yourself, that would be great. Anyhow, so I don't know where Farid is, but we have Frank. But what I'll do while Frank is getting his poems together, I'll read something I just knocked off, actually. And I thought about it while I was preparing for this, but I didn't get a chance to write it down. I just wrote it down. And it's high tide out the window, and it's very beautiful. And I have, so it's called, the poem is High Tide swamps the piers. Their dark, sturdy heads stand above the rising waters. They will not be submerged, erased, or disappeared. Or submitting to the dark waters. They remind me of Palestine. So I think those of us who know Palestine, Linda, if you want to, oh, you unmuted yourself, great. Those of us who know Palestine and Palestinians, I think what impresses us is their resilience. They're extraordinarily resilient people. Every time I would go visit Palestine, I would be foamy at the mouth and, you know, ready to do all kinds of horrible things. And I was always wondering, how are the Palestinians so calm under what they have to go through? They have this strength and this kind of calm resilience that they have to submit to this oppressive regime, and yet it doesn't destroy them. The one thing I want to share with you about the tradition of poetry in Arab culture, it's not the same as in our culture. Poetry is a form of common shared language. Now, in our culture, there are not too many people who can recite poetry from memory, especially now where children are not taught to memorize things. It's considered, old-fashioned. When I went to school, the nuns forced us to memorize a lot of poetry. For that, I'm quite grateful. But now, kids, they don't have any poetry in their brains or their hearts or their souls. What culture has people going to a party where there's going to be a lot of food and booze and bring a poem to read? Because at that party, you're going to be asked to read a poem. This struck me when my dear friend Hilda Fiat, there goes my cat. My dear friend Hilda Fiat invited me to a party of artists and friends in Amman. And it was a very special party because they were importing a very special fish that comes from the Tigris or Euphrates River in Iraq. It's a very special kind of fish, and it's cooked in a special way, and it's driven in from Iraq so that you have it fresh because Jordan is right next to Iraq. So we're at this party, we're drinking arak, which is a wonderful, it's sort of like anisette, those of you from Italian background. It's that same sweet taste, and it's made from flowers. And this one guy came with this bottle of extremely expensive Lebanese arak, Frank, that is supposed to be considered the best of the world, is the arak from Lebanon, made from hundreds of different varieties of flowers. So this is a very special arak, and everybody's drinking it. And we're sitting in a circle, and all of a sudden somebody starts singing some Arab poetry, and everybody knows the poems, and there's one poem after another poem, and everybody's singing and drinking poetry, singing poetry and drinking poetry. And then suddenly they stopped, and the guy, the host, turned to one of the guests and said, "Okay, read us your poem." The guest whips out a poem from his pocket and reads his poem. He goes around to each person at the party and asks them for a poem. So they either had to tell them, recite whatever poem they had just written, or some poem in their head. And they came to me, and, dumb American, I was like, okay, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. And I was like, oh my God, this is such an advanced culture. Such an advanced culture where poetry is like breathing. And everybody's expected to go to a party with their most recent poem in their pocket to share, with everybody getting drunk and having a good time. I became very aware of the role that poetry played, and it's so beautiful. And I think this is part of their resilience, because poetry is always nurturing them. Whenever they get together, they're sharing poems, and they're singing poems, singing poetry. And this is healing for all the trauma that they have to endure. So this poetry is not just words, it's medicine. It's medicine for their souls. And it gives them strength to carry on, and particularly Mahmoud Darwish's poetry. That's why, millions of people in the Arab world can just recite his poetry off the top of their heads. And in stressful situations, they sing it. When I was standing on lines waiting to get through barricades and the checkpoints, you could hear people humming and singing poetry. So I think that the role of poetry in Arab culture is something very awesome, and something that we can not only respect, but we should learn from. So Frank, do you want to read some poetry and nurture our souls?
Yeah, I really relate to poetry as a vehicle, a healing vehicle. It personally, when I keep a pencil and piece of paper next to my bed, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I write stuff down, and a couple of my poems, more than a couple actually, were written down, and I never changed any of them, just flowed from me. And then a lot of times I had to write it down. I felt, and I think that I relate to Palestinians very strongly, and a lot of people, that but to them poetry is healing, that I have to write it down, Jacqui and Linda, or I'm gonna go crazy. It's like not only medicine, it's something healing inside that I have to get out. And then in the face of the occupation, while people are waiting in the checkpoints, it's a way, not just the spiritual side of the Palestinians, the faith that they have, but it's also a way to heal themselves and to focus on the brighter things, as Mahmoud Darwish was doing, without ignoring the stuff around you, because it really, and when the person said about Mahmoud Darwish, I think he felt he wasn't happy. It wasn't about being happy, I think. It was about he was sensitive to the pain and sensitive to the struggle, and that gave rise to a tremendous force inside of him to share. And if you want, I could even read one of his poems that really inspired me later if there's time. But I have a poem that I wrote, and it was a crazy situation in the middle of the Jenin refugee camp. People are familiar with Jenin. you know, the struggles of Jenin, one of the, you know, the greatest centers of resistance. Half Jenin was destroyed by the occupation, and then from all the rubble grew the Freedom Theater with Giuliano Mahamis and his mother, who created this Freedom Theater. Well, I going back and forth there and inside Jenin itself, and I tried for several years to organize demonstrations in the rue Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr is just next to the refugee camp, just a central street downtown Jenin. And sometimes I was able to mobilize a lot of people. Sometimes I was arrested by the Palestinian Authority and so forth. Well, one time I had this amazing event in the marketplace where I just got into the market, and you know, I had the signs, and we had an amazing demonstration in the middle of this in Jenin market. And then that night I was staying with my friend called Yusuf Awad, who was in charge of the cultural center there downtown Jenin. And I stayed with him not far from the refugee camp. And I saw on TV that the Israeli police had entered the Jenin refugee camp looking for suspects. And as usual, they're overly violent. And instead of arresting them, they find ways of killing them. Sometimes they try to defend themselves, and other times it has nothing to do with defense. They just find some pretext to kill these young Palestinians that are accused. They're not even condemned, accused of crimes. And so that the next day there was a huge riot because of the 2 kids that were killed, and I could not get to my taxi to get back to. I wanted to get out of Dodge. It was getting hot. And I move around a lot. You know, you become a target sometimes. So I got to get out of Jenin, get back to Jerusalem, and then back again to organize more things with the Palestinians. I couldn't get to my van, you know, the Shurut, because there was a huge riot in the middle. And so something happened during that riot that I wrote a poem about. It was absolutely amazing. It was just astounding. Yes.
Frank, Farid is on. Farid Bitar, welcome. And
welcome, Farid.
Anjini and Arif Sayed are on Facebook. Arif Sayed and Anjini Appa are on Facebook.
Cool.
Welcome to everybody.
Welcome. So anyway, here's the poem. It's called Gun Down. Did you gun me down in the camps tonight? 4 thin shadows bedded under the stars. An explosion shook the rickety timbers of the overgrown hut, and the helmeted shouts, "Wake up," bang, and a boy went down. Did you gun me down? The next day on the way to the shuttle, my return ride to Jerusalem, I watched on the sidewalk a wild, red-eyed mob winding around the town, circling the block, invading the street, hordes, some carrying Islamic Jihad flags, some shooting off AK-47s into the sweltering heat, others breaking bottles and ramming their fists into shop windows. The Palestinian police had disappeared, as usual, avoiding clashes, I was told. The boys, 100, invaded the streets. I couldn't move, stuck alongside, watching my shuttle head to Jerusalem without me. On the other side, tires were ignited. Dirty rubber smoke infused the air, singeing my throat. Did you gun me down? Then something strange. The chaotic, frenzied mob turned the corner, and about 50 boys turned and pointed at me, started walking, then running towards me. Will you crush me down? I flashed on what an out-of-control mob could do, but it was too late. I cringed, no time to pray, too shocked to pray. Tight lips, then smiles, and then they seemed to lift their thumbs in unison. I thought for the governor's assistant who was standing next to me, but the boys ignored him and appeared to be looking at me. I was then surrounded by them, but instead of grabbing me, they were lining up, reaching out to shake my hand. I shook their outstretched ones, dumbfounded with eyes brimming over blurred images. I wasn't harmed. I didn't get it. Then, as if a horn had called them, they returned almost running backwards, were reabsorbed into the stampeding hordes. Why didn't you crush me down? Something had happened. And then I remembered the eyes of the youth leader heading towards me. His eyes told me, flaming red eyes that softened when they settled on mine. They told me.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Frank. Ooh, chill.
I have no words, Jacqui. That it just, I've got goosebumps right now. And
yeah, me too.
I apologize for lying down, but my hip and knee are very bothersome today.
Okay,
So,
please rest. Yeah, feel the poetry make you feel better.
oh my God. What a gift you have, Frank. What a gift.
I'm just gonna say something, if I may.
Please.
I understand what's going on in the camps. My aunt in the 80s was in the camps. Her name was Faize. And her son is still living in the Sabra camp. So I really salute Frank for doing this and the poem. We did find my aunt alive, but not the other 4,000 or 5,000 dead. And the ICC, I mean, I think Frank should be saluted for the Sharon thing. He's the one that orchestrated the massacre with the Phalange and let them go in. And my father didn't sleep for nights looking for his sister from the same father mother. And we found her in Tripoli 6 months later. The Red Cross found her. Her son is still living in the same place she lived in. So I found her and I called her. And she was in her 80s. And it was very emotional. So I want to thank Frank for doing that. And I just wrote a poem. I don't know if you allow me to read it.
Please, yeah, please, Farid.
I'm very cynical and facetious about my cousin that came visiting me and us, the 8 or 10 million of us. We were not 8 million in the 47, 48, but after the Holocaust, nobody knew what to do with I don't know what. So the Americans were very generous and the British were more generous with my land. So they partitioned everything and they went in India and everywhere else and they gave it away. And they were letting the boats in and they were saying they were not letting things in, but they did. So I just wrote a few days ago, The Unwanted Rat.
I love that. I saw it. It was a great poem. It's amazing.
It's based on a song by Fairuz. My lover is waiting for me under the trestles. My lover is waiting and he is waiting. تحت القناطر محبوبي ناطر والله يا يما لازم يغادر. Unwanted rat. My cousin came knocking insistingly, demanding to stay at my abode. I let him in. I let him to my home, stupidly, to let him get over his misery and hopefully he will leave till his misery is resolved. I knew about his misery and the whole world did, but we were the chosen one to welcome him. But he refused to leave. I begged, I asked, leave. He would not. He ate all the cheese and kicked me out of my home. I started knocking on that door, begging to come back. He changed the locks. I still had the key. I kept knocking and knocking and knocking. He ate my Swiss cheese. I kept knocking and knocking and knocking. He ignored me and said, "Get lost. This is my house now." He changed the locks. I said that. I did. تحت القناطر محبوبي ناطر. I pondered to myself, why is this nightmare taking place again and again and again? One day will come and he will leave. I said he will leave. That day never came. That day never came. That day never came. 73 years later, that day never came. تحت القناطر محبوبي ناطر. والله يا يمه يا يمه لازم يغادر. The unwanted rat. I just wrote it a few days ago.
Love it, Farid. It's so great.
Wow.
I salute you, Frank, for all you're doing. Your guts, your nerve. I don't do half what you do. And I can't believe you write and read Arabic and you speak it. So I tip my hat to you.
Inshallah.
And inshallah, Palestine, I don't know when, will return.
Inshallah. Keep writing, Farid. Keep doing. You're doing plenty. Just do what you do. Do what you can do. That's all we can, man.
And he
Keep
has,
doing it.
but he has a an event September 23rd at Westbeth where he'll be reading his poetry, and I'm going to record it and then I'll put it on a Zoom Palestine for us all to see, because the community room now, because of COVID, they only allow 35 people in at a time, and I'm hoping that this Delta variety doesn't go out of control, because then they'll shut it down again. So September 23rd, he's got his
It'll be a piano, guitar, and tablas and harmonica, and a drummer, kick-ass. And I see a rapper with me.
have a title. I'm going to sponsor your event, and I'll make posters for it here in Westbeth. What do you want to call your event?
Screaming Olives.
Okay. All right, you got it. Okay, I got it. Maybe I'll bring olives. I'll bring olives, trays of olives.
Bring trays of olives and throw them at the audience.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want Jacqui to be thrown out though. She lives there.
And then you're thrown out.
They try to throw me out all the time, so I'm used to it.
Yeah.
You know?
What else is new?
I'm trying to get a package deal for eviction letters to my lawyer. You know.
Oh my God.
10, and I get a cheaper rate for each one. Frank, do you have another poem for us?
Well, I have a Syrian friend who turned me on to one of Mahmoud Darwish's poems. And I have a copy of it. I don't think maybe at the same time you can see, probably you can't see my face right now, right?
Yeah, we know we can see your face.
But because I'm reading, I don't know how to do that. But it's called, "Where Are You Taking Me, Father? Where the wind takes us, my son." As the two were leaving the plain where Bonaparte's soldiers surveyed the shadows on the old wall of Acre, a father said to his son, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the drone of bullets. Stay close to the ground so you'll survive. We'll survive and climb a mountain in the north and return when the soldiers return their distant families." "Who will live in the house after us, father?" asked the son. "It will remain as it is. It has always been, my son." He felt for his key the way he would feel for his limbs and was reassured. He said, as they climbed through a fence of thorns, "Remember, my son, here the British crucified your father on the thorns of a cactus for 2 nights, and he didn't confess. You will grow up, my son, and tell those who inherit their guns the story of the blood upon the iron." Why did you leave the horse alone? To keep the house company, my son? Houses die when their inhabitants are gone. Eternity opens its gates from a distance to the traffic on night. The wolves of the wilderness howl at a frightened moon, and a father says to his son, be strong, like your grandfather. Climb with me the last hill of oaks, my son, and remember, here the Janissary fell from the mule of war. So be steadfast with me, and wool will return. When, father? Tomorrow, or perhaps in 2 days, my son. A reckless tomorrow chewed at the wind. Behind them through the long nights of winter, the soldiers of Yeshua ben Nun build their citadel from their stones of their house, out of breath on the path to Qanna. Here, Jesus passed one day. Here, he turned water into the wine and said many things about love. My son, remember tomorrow. Remember Crusader citadels gnawed at by April weeds after the soldiers' departure.
Wow, it's beautiful. Thank you.
I can read one more.
Darwish.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
I have that book.
Yeah.
You lead the horse.
I've got a book of poems, but I don't have that poem. I don't know why, but I've got his poems here in this book. It's in French and Arabic. Just beautiful, just profound. And he was so humble.
Read one more poem?
Please, Farid. Yeah, yeah.
This poem is very amazing, and I'm going to include it into my new book. It's about the citrine. It's about a stone I found upstate.
Oh.
And it's an amazing story. It's a real story, but it happened to me.
Tell us the story,
poem, and maybe I'll say a little bit at the end. It's called the citrine. The story starts with the land of Canaan, way back down, before anything happened. The citrine stone has been buried for 1,000 years. Upstate New York. It screamed at me, hey, you, buy me. I'm telling you, I'm talking to you. Hey, you, buy me. So I bought it. I got scared. But I buried in the car, away from my car, from my wife. We were camping, and that place, the stone place, took me back. I felt serene. I felt peaceful. I told the lady I felt peaceful. So I hid the stone in my car. Next day came, I woke up full of energy. I went and opened a box to show it to my wife. She said, what now? I said, the stone. You know the stone? She said, it's early. I'm not even up. I said, the stone. So I'm showing her the stone and I'm turning it around. And to my surprise, it was Palestine's map on the stone. I was in shock. Only happened to me. I knew that the stone was telling me, I love you back. I know you love me, but I always love you back. I've always loved you. Thank you for loving me. Please take me home. I promise I will. The citrine, upstate New York. I'm going to read that in my next venue. I was in real shock when I saw the map. It was the exact map. And I put it up and I sent it on an email. And this is amazing. It happened to a Palestinian upstate New York after camping. And it's a sign. It's a sign. Like Frank said, keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to keep doing what you're doing. You're going to keep doing what you're doing. Jacqui is going to do what she's going to do. And she's going to be protected by Allah and God. And nobody's going to kick you out of that place, Westbeth. That's it. It's a dream. Linda, you're not going to read a poem?
No, I'm an excellent listener.
Jacqui is a poet.
And I didn't come prepared to look look up poetry either. So I apologize for that, but
Poetry night.
it is now.
Jacqui?
I read my poem earlier.
Oh, you did.
So,
Sorry.
yeah.
One more.
Frank, do you want to read something?
Yeah, I mean, it's definite. I think it just refers generally to it indirectly refers to all people, including Palestinians, including my family, Italians, when they arrive in a country or before and they're kicked out of their country. And a lot of the roots of this struggle is based on ignorance and racism and a phony idea of chosen few. So I was doing an author event somewhere in North Carolina, and I was staying with this family in a farm, and we were talking in the morning, and we started talking about the Palestinian issue and how the Israelis were, their occupation, all the ugly stuff they were doing to the Palestinians. And they said, we better close the window. I said, what do you mean? We gotta close the window. I said, well, and then I asked why. This place, I mean, there's a church on every corner in this town, and the place is controlled by the KKK, and they're all evangelical, born-again Christians and pro-Israeli like crazy. And we're already trying to avoid any confrontations with them. So I took my jog and went, okay, well, I'm gonna go for a jog. And stuff happened during the jog. It's called Backwoods, my poem. Drops of real Mountain Dew dot my windowsill as I put my shoes before I head out jogging down the narrow country road. Shimmering light from the cabin behind the black silhouette of the pickup truck, dogs nestled near the steps. The mama sighs amid the jostling of the squealing puppies and contentedly suckling. The wind shifts, filtering gently through the yellow-brown leaves, trees of yesteryear. The gurgling of the mountain stream surfing sun-crisp leaves. Dogs bark, and people shuffle down their driveways. Children steer their three-wheelers among scattered toys. Good old boys stirring in chairs on their rickety wooden porches, drinking beer, smoking, waving at me. Their ruddy faces creased with tread of rugged years on the farm, checkered smiles flashing as they bat bustling flies. Flash, a hangman's noose, a strain gurgling from the thrashing black man's throat, the vision of daunting white hoods. The last kicks ruffle the air, then stillness, silence. The rope creaks as the stiffening body slowly turns in the middle of the forest, alone. As I jogged, a picket fence, a lopsided sign with letters missing, "Come to the Lord," it said. Then I have another flash. Country breakfast. I'm the guest. Eggs collected from proud Banty hens strutting in the front yard, delectably scrambled hot cakes bathed in local maple syrup. The bearded father, skin reddened from the sun, smiles through crooked teeth, kindly nodding as he watches me eat. Squinty eye smiles. I stop jogging and walk up the pathway leading to one of a myriad country churches and eye the steeple above. A sense of warning stirs, another flash. Back to the country home where I am the guest again. This is like a dream, like a flash. In front of the fire, he kneads the silky fur of a cocker spaniel nudging close to him. The small head of a young child with gold curls lies resting on his lap, emitting the song of deep, peaceful breathing. I start up again, jogging to the grass on the right to let a pickup truck tumble onwards. As it passes, the metal casings of two rifles, stacked one on top of the other, flash through the window next to a flimsy broom waving and jolting with the truck's movement. Flash again. A loving father hovers over his child, shaking his head at the scene below, smiling with paternal care. Then the door cracks open and he slithers out into the blackness, a white robe curled over his muscular arm.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
Jacqui, you have one more poem?
Please, Farid. Yeah, sure.
No, you.
Please.
I want you to read one more poem.
Oh, no, I don't have my poetry with me. I'm sorry. With me.
May I read one more?
Please, yeah, please. Do.
This is called Solitude. I always go camping just to forget. And I wrote this many years back. Solitude. I am sinking in a gray fog. It's lifting in Eaton's lake. I'm a whiner. I'm sorry, I'm a winner, not a whiner. I regress into a desire of relinquishment. I stumble on a yellow moon. I complain to Akhmatova, she's waiting for her husband out of jail in Leningrad, I mean St. Petersburg of 42. Husband's dead and son in jail. When you pray, tell God my tale. That pain of mine never heals. 73 years now. She cries out, still stuck in St. Petersburg of 42. Trepidation, solitude, and conversation twisted in a dark twilight, running for my destiny, reading Al-Mutanabbi in City Laure Gallery, downtown New York. Solitude.
Wow.
Beautiful, beautiful, Farid.
Anna Akhmatova is my one of my favorite, and I'm very affected by her. And Stalin left her alive for many, many years, and she was never published until he's dead. And Anna Akhmatova is one of my icons, other than Darwish and Ibrahim Tuqan and Fadwa Tuqan, who came before Darwish and who are in Nablus, and they are the true heroes. They stayed in Nablus. And Fadwa Tuqan stayed in Nablus, and Mahmoud Darwish used to read to her under her feet, and he worshipped her, and I worship her, Fadwa Tuqan.
Farid, can you send us a link to her where we can find her poetry?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Because I'd be really interested in reading her work. How do you spell her last name?
Fadwa Tuqan, Touqauqan. I'll send you the link.
Auquan. Okay,
she is much stronger than Darwish, and she stayed. She stayed in 48, and she stayed in 67. And she only wrote in Arabic. But I read her books.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that, buddy. Well, I want to share with you a piece of good news for a change. It's see if I can find the link. Okay, that's not working. Let me see. Share screen. Where is my? Okay, well, anyhow, I'll just tell you until I can get this to work. Today's news from the electronic intifada. Okay, now I've got it up, so I should be able to share it with you. Is that I had written in the email that there was a Palestinian woman in an Israeli prison who was about to give birth, and they finally let her out. So that her name is Anhar Aldik, and they agreed to release her conditionally on Thursday and imposed a bail of $12,500. So she's going to stay with her family home in the village of Kafr Nima, northwest of Ramallah, and she will be able to have her baby at home in Romano. She says, quote, only a detainee who has been freed with the help of God after experiencing incarceration can understand how I am feeling right now. So that's a great piece of news. Another.
The Arabic says, I finally saw the skies.
Yeah. So, and then there's another story, which is also positive, a little positive news, is that the Labor, which is reversed their ban on a Palestinian Solidarity Campaign speaker, which is very good. That they've apologized for telling its youth wing that it could not speak alongside the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign at the UK's party's annual conference later this month. Young Labour had been told by a party official that they could not invite PSC to address one of their events at the conference, the campaign said. When pressed for a reason, they said that the PSC's positions were controversial. Like that's a crime, the campaign explained. After discussions with party officials on Wednesday night, PSC and Young Labour were informed there had, quote, had been a mistake, and that PSC could be invited after all, and an apology was given. On Tuesday, Young Labour's chair, Jess Barnard, posted on Twitter that she had been told by unnamed party officials that, quote, anyone from Palestine Solidarity Campaign will be refused as a speaker, as will Jeremy Corbyn, a left-wing political activist and party's former leader. And poor Jeremy Corbyn is under the most vicious campaign of attack. It's unbelievable. The campaign said in its statement on Thursday that it had been, quote, informed by well-planned sources that a senior party official had cited PSC's support for the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, BDS. The official had claimed this might violate the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism we were talking about. And now this is another example of how this definition is going to be used to stifle all dissent, which was all predicted when it first came out. Cloud of suspicion. Contacted by the Electronic Intifada, PSC dedicated the name to senior Labour official, cited assurances of confidentiality given its sources. However, the Labour Party did not respond to a request for comment. Surprise, surprise. But anyhow,
thinking about what Mahmoud Darwish said, in spite of all this political nonsense and mea culpa, is that there was no mistake, obviously. He still managed, in spite of all the suffering, and I know Farid in your poetry has manifested, even though it's really hard not to be cynical and pessimistic because you're in pain. How, and he was in pain. I think it wasn't the fact that he was unhappy. He was just in pain and he felt the suffering and he expressed the suffering. He never forgot, though, something that I try on a daily, I have to do on a daily basis, to kick hate and insecurity and all those emotions out and focus on love. And I want to just read a very short something. It's called Cronkite Beach. I was at this beach, not forgetting the love feeling, because we can sometimes get so caught up in our pain, get so negative. Love, where is it? Darwish focus. That's what keeps us going. It's not the hate. Let's try to push it out and work on the love, working together. But we got to take action. It's not just hakifade, come on, Arabiya, right? Empty words. We need to do something, get in the streets, do something about it, not just write. We focus on the writing and then we do something. So
he also lived in Beirut for a long time.
That's
he wrote
right.
About Kabr and Shatila, and he wrote about the siege of 82. So he was up close and personal.
And he saw it and felt it. And he was in Tunis and other places. But anyway, this is called Cronkite Beach. It's just a small beach in north of San Francisco. It helps me remember not to forget love, like Mahmoud Darwish is trying to express and to encourage people to think about love. Here it is. Gone, ocean's arms spraying rose on pale cheeks. Warm kisses contrast the crashing waves. Distant booming. It can't be so. It's all gone. Don't ever leave. I can't forget. Burns inside at remembering each time. I can't forget. If I do, then I'm numb. Numb until death frees me to feel again.
Wow, wow, wow. Well, speaking of love, I love you guys. And Linda, love to all of you. Thank you for being with
Love
us.
you too, everybody. Thank you.
And we'll, so send me suggestions for people to interview. I have I'm going, trying to get contacts with students from the Fordham group that was banned by the Fordham, which is a Jesuit university. I was shocked. So I'm going to try to have some students from student groups come and talk to us. But please send me ideas for people to interview for future sessions. And Farid, I look forward to the 23rd.
Is that
we'll share.
The 23rd?
I think wasn't it the 24th, whatever was it the.
Is that on? Because I'm contacting my people.
Well, I didn't hear back from her yet, but it probably is. You know, I'll let you know as soon as I hear. Yeah, I'm sure it's okay. So, but
I'm glad you're feeling better, Jacqui.
Pardon? Yeah, I'm good.
You are feeling better, healthier.
Yeah. No, I'm feeling good. Back to my old self, whatever that means. And my cats are here, are stalking me right now because they usually get fed at noon. So I have to. And send my love to all of you. And it's my son's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, and I posted these little pictures I found of him with his curly blonde hair, although he's bald now. But he had an interesting experience when he went to Jerusalem. You know, my kids, you know, children are always more conservative than their radical parents, you know. So, you know, whatever, if you have conservative parents, you become a radical. If you have radical parents, you are a little conservative. So my kids always think, you know, well, Ma, you know, you're a little over the top. So I took my son to Jordan and then I took him to Jerusalem. And my son, you know, he's pro-Palestinian, but he thinks that I'm a little extreme until he went to Jerusalem. And as we were going through the checkpoint, going over the Allenby Bridge, King Hussein Bridge, they separated us, and I got through because, you know, I'm an old lady and I just always say, I'm going for a pilgrimage, you know. So, you know, because I realized that, because I've been detained. I was detained 7 hours along with Noah Chomsky, same time as Noah Chomsky in different rooms, 7 hours for interrogation until my Jewish relatives in Israel told them that to let me in. So my son, they let me through, but my son they kept because he was in his 20s or early 30s at the time, and he fit the profile of people they suspect are coming to maybe support Palestinians. He's coming from Jordan, you know, he's traveling with a backpack. He's of the dangerous age for males. And so they detained him and questioned him. He kept saying, look, I'm with my mom, you know, she's right over there. But he couldn't see me because they had put me through. And when he finally got through, he was very, very traumatized because he is an American kid who's never experienced anything like this, traveling with his mother, for God's sake. And he's Jewish, you know, it's Isaac, he's got a Jewish name. And they gave him such a hard time. He was totally traumatized. And he came through, he said, Mom, why did you leave me? You don't know what I went through, you know. And from then on, we had one experience after another where he became totally convinced about the brutality of the Israeli occupation. In Jerusalem, we were looking at some ancient Roman road near the Jewish quarter, you know, where they have the ancient Roman road you can look at. And some kid, little settlement kid with his little yarmulke on, about 11, 12 years old, rode his bike into my son. My son has light hair, so he thought he was a non-Jew tourist, and he drove his bike into my son. So, my son was like so traumatized to see little children with such vicious anger and brutality. And it totally transformed his opinion about Palestine and Israel. That's why it's so important for people to visit, because until you see those walls and the barbed wire and the dogs and the guns pointed at you all the time, you don't get what that occupation is like. And even in Israel, you can't ride a bus without having it filled with people with guns. It's a military state based on violence, and it's terrifying. So I just urge everybody who can to possibly visit Palestine, because you don't get it until you see what goes on. So my son was finally, transformed into being an ardent pro-Palestinian person just once he saw what was going on. So that's why sharing what we're sharing is so important, because not everybody can go to Palestine. They can't go, especially now during COVID. So we have to keep telling people what's going on. Knowledge is power. Speaking truth to power is important. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and I'll see you next Saturday. Have a great week. Frank, when do you go back to Lebanon?
Few days, probably less than a week. I'm here to visit my daughter in France and preparing to go back.
It's a mess there. I hear from Richard often, and it's really bad. You know what you might want to get? I ordered one. I got one from the local hardware store. I have a emergency kit that has a solar generator in it, solar powered. It's like a little sheet, and you just put it in the window, and you can charge your cell phones and everything. And also it has flashlights. I'm sure you can get something like that, a little emergency kit with flashlights.
Yeah, thanks for that idea. I had no clue about that. Yeah. Flashlights
that connect to your solar. The solar thing is about this big. You just put it in your window, it folds up and put it in your window, and you can get solar power, so you can get flashlights and a charge for your computer and for your phones and everything. So I'm sure the French have a good version of it. Mine here was a little pricey. I got it in a kind of fancy store. It's about $100, but it's worth it, because now I know we're at hurricanes and all that.
We have only a few hours of electricity. It's like Gaza.
Yeah.
Sometimes 4 hours, sometimes 3.
Yeah.
It varies, sometimes more.
And this thing with this solar panel is, I told my neighbors, I said, look, if we have a hurricane, I've got this solar panel. I can charge your phones, so you can help yourself and also help the community. So I'm sure they have those versions in France. Farid, how did you do in Jersey with the hurricane, with the floods?
Pretty bad. Maybe 7, 8 towns were flooded. My town was flooded. I went to the supermarket. Everything was flooded, like 6, 7 inches of rain. So it was bad, very bad. I couldn't get to work, and I had to take vacation time. I'm like, I'm not vacationing. I'm being drowned.
Shouldn't you get emergency time off? It shouldn't be vacation. No, there's a big article in the New York Times that New Jersey highways and roads became death traps.
Couldn't get to the train. I couldn't get to the train. So I'm like, not vacationing. I'm drowning.
Did your townhouse get flooded in the basement?
Yeah, flooded.
Yeah.
Supermarkets flooded, stores flooded.
Yeah.
Amazing. But
well, this is what's going to be going on. There's going to be more of this, certainly, with climate change. And one hopes that they pass that legislation in DC and Washington. But I just think our country has just gone so nuts right now. They're not going to do what's good for them. It's like we have a culture, a death wish culture. It's just anyhow. But let's be positive, and let's hope So, you know, we get our own solar panels, so we'll survive anyway and be able to keep doing what we do. All right, love you all. So I'll see you
Love
all
you,
next
too.
weekend. Good travels, Frank. God bless.
God bless all you folks. Keep it
Thank
going.
you.
Keep it going.
Bye.
Thank you.
Masalama. Bye. Masalama.
Ma salame.